And good morning to you. Greetings and salutations. What a beautiful Saturday morning for Impact 2020 Part 2. Thank you so much for joining us. Before I go any further, let me just say Happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there. Thank you for what you do for us. Thank you for all the sacrifices you make. We love you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day tomorrow. If you were with us in January, we were at Langston Hughes Performing Arts Institute, fellowshipping together, beginning Impact 2020. And I want to welcome you back. If you are joining us for the first time, we are happy to have you come along with us on this Impact 2020 journey. My name is Angela Ray. I work for the Seattle Department of Neighborhoods, and we are in partnership with Northwest African American Museum, Langston Hughes Performing Arts Institute, New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, and CD Forum for Arts and Ideas. Impact 2020 is all about providing access to the African American community in the Central District and those with ties to the area. We want to hear your voice. We want to know what is on your mind. We are here for you. And if you've ever felt like you did not have access, well, you do. In January, we had 7 city department directors joining us to listen to the community. Today, we have 11, I am proud to say. They are here to listen to you, to offer advice about the programs that some of their departments can provide, and more. So we are happy to provide you with what you deserve as a community member in Seattle. You deserve to be able to feast at the table of access, and today you will be able to do that. Let me tell you about our format. We are using Microsoft Teams. If you have a question, there is a question and answer, a Q&A section if you're on your computer that's in the upper right-hand corner. If you don't see that, look for the question mark. Please write your questions there. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see you. I hate that. But with technology being the way it is and with the world we're living in now, we're just going to have to give each other some grace with this technology. So there is a bit of a delay. There could be a 20 to 60 second delay. So give us a little grace also with that, with the technology. This gathering is being recorded. I've been contacted by some people to find out if they can actually see this. Yes, we will make this available to you. And I will also give you my email address and my phone number so you can call me or email me about anything you need or want. Even if it's just, I need somebody to talk to, I'm there for you. That's what this is all about. I'm really happy to have joining me today to co-facilitate Nate Moxley. He is with the P-Patch program as a community garden coordinator, and he has a very keen focus on environmental and food justice. And also we are looking to join us. He is trying his best to get on, is community member at Deaf Chef. We all know him, Jermaine Miller. He's been a fixture in the Central District and now lives down south. He's an activist and he's a really great guy. And so he's one of the community members that we elevated to the facilitator position. So we're hoping that you get on. We've got our fingers crossed. So as I mentioned, we have 11 city directors joining us. Let me quickly tell you who they are so we can get to Impact 2020 and to your questions. Bobby Lee with the Office of Economic Development. Sam Assefa with the Office of Planning and Community Development. Sam Zimbabwe, the Seattle Department of Transportation. Randy Engstrom, Office of Arts and Culture. Mariko Lockhart, Office of Civil Rights. Emily Alvarado, Office of Housing. Mami Hara, General Manager and CEO of Seattle Public Utilities. Jason Johnson, Seattle Human Services Department. Debra Smith, General Manager and CEO of Seattle City Light. Jesús Aguirre, Superintendent, Seattle Parks and Recreation. Jeneé Jahn, Office of Labor Standards. And my boss, Andres Mantilla, of Seattle Department of Neighborhoods. We will also hear from Elsa Batres-Boni, who is the point person for the City of Seattle for Census 2020. If you have not filled out your census, we will make a plea for you to do so, as it is very important. Impact 2020 is all about the community, so let's get to it. Let's start now with Matias Valenzuela. He is with Seattle King County Public Health. We need to find out what are the numbers, what is going on with respect to the African American community and COVID-19 deaths, as well as other communities of color. Matias, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us here on Impact 2020. We have certainly seen data from around the country, and it is damning. Tell us what you have found out about Seattle and King County.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks for also having Public Health Seattle King County be part of this important conversation. I think setting context in terms of some of the data is important, and I think I have one slide that maybe is going to show more information specific to the African American community. I know there were a lot of reports early on from some other metro areas in which that the African American community was disproportionately impacted. I think we had some early numbers that were showing that communities of color here in our region were following a similar trend, but not really until last week did we really do some work to kind of crunch the numbers and do actually, there's a lot of work that went into this. We unfortunately in our state do not track race and ethnicity as a standard when we do reporting of diseases. So this is one of the things that we're advocating for right now, not just for COVID-19, but for diseases overall, to be able to actually, so laboratories and healthcare providers can track this in a more comprehensive way, so then we can develop the appropriate strategies to then respond, which I think is really important. So what we were able to release last week, and again, this is online as part of the new dashboard, is a new race dashboard that begins to really confirm what we who work in this area and have experience working in communities of color, unfortunately, just given the underlying and systemic issues we know really begin to play out. And we have been able to see here, and you can see this, we reported in 3 different categories, which is confirmed cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. So we were able to find out there that in terms of, for the Black population, as you can see, the rate is double when compared to whites. Interestingly enough, though, actually the rate among Hispanic Latinx population and also the Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian in terms of confirmed cases is 4 times that of whites. I think it's also important to point out that among our Indigenous and Native brothers and sisters, they're American Indian and Alaska Native, it's also higher, but it's not statistically significant, but that's not because it's not a significant population. I just want to make sure that it's what the numbers are low. We have low numbers of urban Indians, so that is why it shows that way. But I think as we get more numbers, we get more cases, that there's going to be statistical significance in that area. Also want to say this is for confirmed cases. In terms of hospitalizations, we see a similar thing actually, about double in terms of Blacks when compared to, and African Americans when compared to whites. Among also Pacific Islanders and Native Hawaiians, it's a similar thing. And again, we actually see the largest differences in terms of hospitalizations among the Latinx population. So we're looking at 4 times more. And also, I think when we look at deaths, we see a similar pattern. So these are the confirmed cases. Also, I think the map on the right will show just the geographic breakdown, what we tend to see. And this is for COVID. And you can go on our site and look by census tract and see the exact count of where those people live and where we're seeing most of the cases. So I think that's an important feature. And the other thing I want to underline too, because this map that you see here and also these graphs, we actually, in public health, we do a lot of data crunching. We do look at a lot of surveys and conditions. We look at death records and certificates and vital statistics, behavioral risk factor surveys that are done to just assess the state of the health of the community. What we're seeing here with COVID is a similar thing that we see both by race and by place, that what we see in for other diseases, chronic diseases, what we see in terms of income, in terms of educational levels, and those kinds of things too. I will point out it's kind of small, so you will have to go onto the dashboard to look at this more closely, but this is also in terms of geography. We tend to see in South Seattle here higher rates. And then South King County, and then there's some pockets towards the north, probably the very north of Seattle, and then going into Shoreline too. And then we have some areas in pockets of northeast King County too, where we have some higher rates. So again, this very much mirrors, and it's not surprising. So I just want to touch on, what's behind this. I mean, I think a component of it is access to healthcare. So of course, we know communities of color have more barriers to healthcare, and not just health insurance, it's also a distrust of the system, just given some of the historical issues, which I think many of us are aware of. And then also, and particularly with the Latinx community, and I think one of the, we're looking into this closer, but we know that there are also people documented individuals don't qualify for federal health programs. There's also delay in seeking services, those kinds of things. So that is contributing. A lot of this is also due just some root causes. I mean, I think most of the health outcomes are always done, not just access to healthcare, but there's the social determinants of health, which we talk about. So access to good paying jobs, education, being able to live in healthy environments. So this is walkable neighborhoods, access to healthy foods, those kinds of things are actually much more important than just access to health. So I think just talking about some of those root causes is extremely important. And also, I'll just say those root causes then connect to just the more likelihood that you're going to have underlying health conditions. So if you're less likely to be able to exercise, more likely to be obese, have diabetes, heart disease, etc., that makes you more likely to have an underlying health condition. Then those are disproportionately, for example, African Americans more likely to have those. And then that is a risk factor for COVID-19. Right, so more likely to have complications, hospitalization, and death as well. What I'll end by just saying, and I think it also relates to the next topic that you have, is what we are seeing. Many of the early cases that we are seeing were in long-term care facilities, which were heavily white. What we are looking at now, and we're able to see and track where we're seeing the cases more recently, and that is more spreading in the community, so not so much in these congregate settings, long-term care facilities. So we've also been what's happening really is that they're both living and working conditions that are contributing to this. So of course, more communities of color live in multi-generational households. It make it more difficult to physically distance if a person is positive for COVID-19 and can lead to more infections among household members. The other issue, which I think is also very challenging, is the issue, and that's the next topic that is up in terms of essential workers. So we also have numbers. We show that a lot of the folks who are having to not able to either shelter in place or actually in a vital area, whether it's a restaurant, cooking, or whether they're in the transportation industry, or the ones that are keeping our services running and our buildings clean, those kinds of things are disproportionately people of color. So we have some very challenging situations, both in workplaces and living conditions, in which people are actually often getting sick. And then even if they get sick in a workplace or become infected, they come home and then infect their households, where sometimes we have other folks who might be at risk, or you might have a grandparent living there. So that's contributing to what we see if maybe early on, both long-term care facilities and homeless shelters were of highest concern. I would say are increasingly our focus needs to be on essential workers and the situation that we're having in our communities of color and multi-generational households. So thanks, Angela.
Angela, you're on mute.
Thank you, Andres. Back to the essential employees conversation. I've had people, well, Matthias, this does disproportionately impact communities of color. And I've had people say to me, why am I considered an essential employee? Why is the liquor shop being open considered essential, or the weed shop? Why is that considered essential? I've heard people complain that their bosses quarantine themselves or are never at work, but that they have to show up to work. So the essential employees conversation begins to certainly sound like a conversation that we need to have here with the African American community, because we are part of the essential employees and we are then being disproportionately impacted.
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. I mean, there are a lot of the businesses that have, especially early on, have remained open are the ones such as, markets and supermarkets and grocery stores and pharmacies. Also the transportation sector. I mean, we sadly have lost at least one metro bus driver as well, and we know, at least for King County workforce, that's where we have the largest numbers of Black and African American employees is in our bus drivers and people that work in those areas. So those are really, that's the challenging thing about this. Those are our industries, and people need to eat, people need to get around. At least those that have to be able to go to work. So it's very tragic, but it's these policies again, and there's some folks who predominantly are, it's the white population who have more resources too, that can, and at the end have the luxury of staying home and not having to go out. And a lot of us, or at least in communities of color, have to go and make the income, so I think that's really a challenging situation. And whenever you have an emergency like this, it's those communities of color that are the most negatively impacted. There is one question. Can I answer when somebody was asking? I see here, at least in one of the chats, that asking about the black lines in the icon. That's just referring statistical significance. So these are numbers that are kind of doing a statistical analysis. So sometimes it falls in a particular number. So for the Black population, let me see if I can get that exact number. The Black population there around confirmed deaths that's a 328 is the number. So that's a precise number in terms of that rate. But at the end, it's just these numbers are considered statistically, they're unstable, so they actually can vary either down to about 300 to higher up there to closer to 400. So really, these shouldn't be considered. It's more like this range, right? And it's just based on the numbers of cases that we have in that particular population. I hope that helps explain it better. I think you're muted, Angela.
Boy, this is just going to be a day for that. Thank you so much. Edna is asking a question. She says, good resources needed on changing neighborhood central area for older adults. Andres, who should I toss this one to? Good resources needed on changing neighborhood central area for older adults.
I think we can take this question in a couple of different ways. We have Jason Johnson here, who oversees aging and disabilities, who kind of oversees some of those contracts for senior centers, et cetera. Jason, do you want to just quickly talk about some of the things HSD has in terms of supporting older adults specific to the Central District or in the surrounding neighborhoods?
Yeah, happy to. Good morning. This is Jason Johnson with the Human Services Department. Thanks for the opportunity to participate today. As Andres mentioned, the Human Services Department is the area agency for aging across King County. And what that means is that we are responsible for and federally mandated to ensure that there are first in-home care services for older adults and people living with disabilities across the county. And in that work, we serve anywhere between 12,000 and 14,000 households. And, the COVID-19 outbreak has made this work incredibly challenging. You were just talking about essential workers, and we have essential workers who are every day helping to ensure that services are available in people's homes. And we want to make sure that those essential services continue, but we also want to make sure that first and foremost, the client being served is safe, and that the individuals who are coming into their home to deliver meals, provide medical care, provide essential services, such as in-home chores and offering transportation to and from medical appointments, are not putting that individual in danger. But we also have been working really hard to ensure that our case managers, the service providers, who are sometimes individual families, members of families who are providing some of these essential services, that those employees are kept safe as well. So early on, we needed to make sure that there was the appropriate level of PPE in place for these employees, as well as for the individuals needing service. And again, these in-home care services are available countywide, including in the Central District, and these in-home care services are something we very much consider essential. The other services that that HSD, or the Human Services Department, consider essential are the services that take place in community. So these are services for older adults that exist inside of senior centers, inside of meal programs, at food banks, inside of clinics, and we have done everything we can to ensure that those services continue to remain open and available for the people who need them. And so, for senior centers, I think this has been especially challenging. Senior centers exist so that we can increase social activities. And in this, state of COVID, and in response to COVID, we are trying to do the exact opposite by ensuring social distancing and asking that people remain in quarantine. And so this has an incredibly huge impact on seniors and others who use senior centers as a place for social engagement, social interaction, and for that connection to community. What we've been able to do is ensure that the essential services that exist inside of senior centers continue. Sometimes senior centers are the only place that an individual may be able to access a meal. We want to make sure that that meal is still available to individuals. And so whether senior centers have been able to stay open and provide services and those meals with social distancing and hygiene and sanitation guidelines in place, or if some of those senior centers have had to transition to meal delivery or meal provision in some other kind of way, like a pickup or takeout kind of model, we've been working to ensure that those services stay in place. But we know that during this period of emergency, those senior centers, which again are a hub of community engagement and social involvement, are not currently able to be that place of connection. But from the human services perspective, we've been trying to ensure that the services that go along with those important places of connection are still in place and remain in place for older adults and people living with disabilities.
Jason, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I just want to go ahead and make the announcement again that we unfortunately can't see you. I wish we could, our viewers out there. So we want you to actually use the Q&A section. It may have a question mark. It should be at the right, in the right corner if you're on your computer, and type in any questions you might have for us. We are here to answer them. As we were talking about essential employees, I wanted to bring in Jeneé Jahn with the Office of Labor Standards, because what we're also talking about, part and parcel, is the protection of employees.
Thank you, Angela. Good morning, everyone. This is Jeneé Jahn. As Angela mentioned, I'm the Interim Director of the Seattle Office of Labor Standards. One of the things that our office does is implements a law called the Paid Sick and Save Time Law that provides paid sick leave for folks when they need to take time off work in order to care for themselves or for a loved one, if they're required to self-quarantine, and for other absences related to health and safety. One of the reasons why this law was promulgated back in 2011 is for moments like these. So where our essential workers, where folks who are on the front lines really need access to take time off, right? The understanding then and now is that many of our low-wage workers are disproportionately represented, or sorry, our disproportionately representation is from communities of color. And so in order to kind of secure economic security for workers is they need to have paid time off in order to take care of themselves and loved ones. So one of the ways that we have tried to help in this area is to make sure that folks have access to information about that right, so that as folks are navigating the impacts of COVID, that they know that they have that protection. And if you're working outside of Seattle, also know that the state passed a law in 2018 that also provides the same kind of paid leave. So just wanted to lift that up, knowing that this was an important part of making sure that all of our community has access to that economic security, that they can, make sure they can still pay their bills, even if they have to take time off to take care of their own health or that of their family. Thanks, Angela.
Jeneé, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. We're getting some questions in, and I want to make sure that we address them. Randy Engstrom of the Office of Arts and Culture, I wanted to go to you as we were talking about essential employees. I know you have something that you've created called Essentially Seattle. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's a project that we're doing in partnership with Seattle City Light, where we are going to hire 25 artists to document the work of frontline and essential workers throughout the city. That's everything from the folks who are keeping your lights on and keeping your water running, the folks who are working in hospitals and restaurants, as well as the sort of community and mutual aid efforts that are holding our communities and our neighborhoods together. The community kitchen collaborative and the murals that are going up on closed businesses, as well as the incredible work of our local first responders. So the idea is, how can we hire some of our artists who've been impacted by this crisis and document the great work that's happening around the city. I also just want to give a special shout out to SPU. It was really in large part their concept, and it's really our two utilities that are allowing us to be able to do this work.
Randy, thank you. Mami Hara of SBU, can you go ahead and elaborate on that for us?
Certainly. We have many essential workers at our utility, and often the kind of work that they do is invisible to the people they serve. The people who make sure that the water runs out of your tap, or that your garbage gets taken away, or that the waste from your bathrooms gets taken away, are not typically folks that people think about as essential workers, but they are making sure that those services are reliable and done in a way that is very considerate of the needs of folks, especially at this time. And so we wanted to raise their profile, to also make them know that people appreciate what they do. And so we reached out to Arts and Culture to ask and see if there was a way that we could create, beautiful portraiture or interpretations of their work that we could highlight as much as possible in order to create awareness. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about our essential workers. They're really doing amazing work these days.
Yes, they are, and thank you very much. And the arts community is a wonderful community here in Seattle, King County area, and it's so good to always hear about that community being lifted up. I want to talk about food for a little bit because I think we need to. We're hearing about food shortages. I know my husband has built me a greenhouse. I know a lot of us are growing our own. Nate Moxley, my co-facilitator. Nate, are you there?
I'm here.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing and hearing as a Pea Patch Community Garden Coordinator?
Absolutely. Thank you. Demand is at an all-time high. And one of the things that I want to do today is just be a resource for folks that are looking to have a community garden or be a part of a community garden. to get into gardening. I think we all know that food is linked to health outcomes and health in general. One of the things that we're also noticing, and this has been an issue throughout the last, throughout the existence of the PPATCH program, is that African Americans are underrepresented, and it's one of the things that we're looking to change. And so part of my message today is that for folks out there, African American folks in particular, that want to be involved in a community garden or learn more about gardening in general, I want to be a resource for you. So just want to put my number out there. It's 206-256-6202. And my email address is nathaniel.moxley@seattle.gov. Again, it is something that's at an all-time high. We're getting lots of calls in, folks wanting to participate, folks showing up at gardens, and finding different entry points to getting involved. We are looking at expanding the ways in which people can participate through our Giving Garden program, where folks grow food for the food banks, and as well as through our co-gardening program. And so we'll be ramping up to try to meet some of that demand. With 89 gardens across the city and about 3,000 plus participants, there isn't room for everyone, but we do have some priority placement program that allows us to move folks up the interest list so that underrepresented populations, low-income folks, immigrants, Black folks, Latino folks can all find their way into a community garden.
Nate, thank you so much. And let me just go ahead and repeat how you can get to us today. If you're already on Microsoft Teams, but you want to get a question to us, there is this, look for a question mark that's in the right-hand corner. If it may be a little small, but that's what I need you to click on, and then that will get you to us so that you can ask your questions. Let me talk to the Superintendent of the Seattle Parks and Recreation, Jesús Aguirre. Jesús, I understand that Parks also has an urban garden program.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, we do. We have an urban garden program that actually works in coordination with Department of Neighborhoods, Office of Sustainability, the libraries, and SPU. And I think, this is part of, as Nathan said, I think it's really important for us to work with communities to try to provide access, particularly these PPATCHs. They're a real historic part of the city, but don't often provide access to new folks who want to take advantage of these. So, as part of our urban food systems program, we're also launching a collaborative effort to harvest edibles from public lands, which is sort of an interesting thing we can do. We've got lots of land here in Seattle, and actually we have many fruit-bearing trees, for example, and so we want to work with the community to educate folks about how to do some of the fruit collection and other edibles in these gardens.
Thank you, Jesús. We have a question for Randy. Hi, Randy. Great idea with the project you mentioned. Will there be an opportunity to collect the stories of the workers in conjunction with the artists? Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to interpret the question. I think we're going to hopefully be able to engage artists across a variety of disciplines. So both photographers, filmmakers, writers. We want to be able to really capture the full depth and richness of not just the work that folks are doing, but sort of who those folks are. And in fact, this week through our Seattle Together partnership with the Department of Neighborhoods, we're going to be launching a social media campaign that's really going to try to center the stories of Seattle residents and how they're experiencing this crisis as a way to sort of humanize all of us and find ways to build bonds and build connections. So I do think that we're going to try to do that through the essentially Seattle program. I also think we're going to try to do that through a variety of platforms that we're trying to stand up in partnership with other departments at the city. Let me know if that answered the question or not.
Yes, that's awesome, Randy. Thank you so much. And collecting stories, I mean, that's what Impact 2020 is all about, is actually collecting stories. So this is a wonderful extension of what it is that we do. I wanted to bring in Sam Zimbabwe right now with the Seattle Department of Transportation, as we were, and we're going to be going back and forth, so I know you guys can roll with it. But as we were talking about gardening and food, talk to us a little bit about the use of public right-of-way for something like this and other activities, and then can you explain what that means, public right-of-way, for some of us who may not know?
Sure. Thanks, and it's great to be with everybody. And it's so hard to do this in this online format rather than the great format we had back in January. Just a little bit about, I mean, there's opportunities to, similar to what Jesús was talking about, you know, have even edible fruit trees and things like that in the public right of way, in the streets, in those areas between private property. And there's ways to turn planting strips and things like that into gardens as well. We've also, as folks are probably aware, we've been thinking about how to make it possible for people to get around neighborhoods to and from parks safely, to and from other community needs on a safe basis, and that's where we've launched our Stay Healthy Streets, trying to connect communities right now and be able for people to walk or bike or use the streets differently and still maintain that social distancing. So there's lots of great opportunities both within the streets themselves, within the areas alongside of streets for things like growing food and but then also for making sure people have ways to get to and from their daily needs during this time and on into the future as well.
Sam, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Mariko, can you talk about the anti-hate campaign? That would be great. Mariko Lockhart with the Office of Civil Rights.
Hi, Angela. Thanks so much for raising that issue because I think it's a really critical one and one that we're seeking to address. You know, in times of crises, very often the fear that comes from that crisis end up resulting in acts of hate and racism and discrimination. And we've seen it, you know, time and time again. I can name a personal example for my family. Back during World War II, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the government incarcerated Japanese residents out of fear and complete ignorance about what would actually address the issue. And we've seen Islamophobic vitriol and violence after the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center. And in 2014, with the Ebola outbreak, it led to an intensification of anti-Black racism, especially toward people of West African descent. And so when the coronavirus or COVID-19 started showing up and impacting our communities, there was a clear uptick in hate violence, specifically directed at our Asian community. And we've seen the kind of, you know, racist acts also begin to expand to other communities like our Muslim community, our African American community, as really the genesis of it is, you know, is racism. So one thing that the mayor has asked is that the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, as well as the Seattle Office for Civil Rights, join together and begin to coordinate some efforts to address that. And one of the first things we did was to reach out to community members and community leaders in the Asian community to find out what would be important as these to them as these issues and incidents of hate and bias began to proliferate. And so what we heard was it was really important for the city to share a very strong message that those kind of acts would not be acceptable and would not be tolerated, and as well as tracking them, making sure that we're documenting when and where and how those incidents take place. So a couple of things that we've done that you will begin to see, I hope, and notice around the neighborhood or on social media, is we have increased some awareness around our bias reporting hotline, which has been in existence for a number of years, but I think has fallen off the radar of a lot of folks. So if you see or experience an act of bias, you can call our office and report it at our hotline, which is area code 202-233-7100. And also, we now have an online reporting tool, which you can access by at seattle.gov/report-bias. I can put those in the chat box, and I know that this meeting is being recorded, so it will be available, and I think all participants will be able to get follow-up emails, so we can make sure that you have that information. And we want to spread that widely in multiple languages so that people have access to that information. So you will likely see it on bus ads around the city, both outside and inside buses. We'll be sharing it through social media posts, and I'm excited that part of the outreach effort is a collaboration with the project that Director Engstrom, Randy from Arts, mentioned. So we'll be using some of that beautiful artwork and messaging from our Seattle artist community on a number of those ads. So, you know, we're trying to get the word out. The goal in reporting and gathering that information is so that we can use it to help residents get connected to resources and to help city decision makers focus our efforts in ways that are that can be most responsive to community concerns. So thank you for the opportunity to share that, Angela.
Mariko, thank you so much. The racism that we have seen as a result of COVID-19 has just been appalling. And as you said, it's happening to those in the Asian community, and it is happening to other people of color, as we think about the gentleman who unfortunately lost his life as two people shot him in the back. So thank you, Mariko, for what you do and for what your department does to make sure that we are centering on race and that we are doing what we need to do to try and get rid of institutionalized racism. So many places we can go. Randy, I see that you said you got a random text from somebody asking about cooling centers.
Yeah, just thinking about, I mean, good call from some thoughtful community members. Today's a warm day. We may be inside for longer than we would have liked, and wondering if we have a plan or if we're going to develop a plan around socially distant cooling centers. I don't know the answer. It was just a question, so I thought I would.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. Jahn, I think Jason will be able to answer that. Jason?
Yeah, hi, Jason Johnson with the Human Services Department. There are, you know, as part of our emergency operations plan, anytime that there are extreme weather conditions, such as snow or ice or freezing, or if temperatures greatly increase and become dangerously warm, we invite individuals to use city facilities that are open and available and typically have heating or central air. Many of our community centers and libraries and a number of city facilities are closed right now to the general public. So I'll, you know, this is a great question, and one that I want to immediately raise for our Emergency Operations Center to see if there's been any citywide thinking on making some spaces available for cooling if temperatures, you know, go beyond their predicted 80 degrees. So a good question, and I'm sorry I don't have a very specific answer at this point, but we'll look into this question and see what resources are available.
Jason, so much. I want to toss it now to Jesús Aguirre, Superintendent of Seattle Parks and Recreation. I know there's going to be some park closures and some other things that will be materializing, right, Jesús?
Yes, so thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about sort of how our operations at the Department of Parks and Recreation continue to evolve in response to this emergency. So so on one of those, Jason just mentioned, many public buildings are closed, so most of our community centers remain closed due to the emergency. We have actually opened up a couple of our community centers to serve as shelters. So we've got actually, as of now, 3 community centers that are serving as shelters as part of the HSD plan to help provide additional space for our homeless residents. In terms of our ongoing work, so we also have a few community centers that are opened for emergency childcare for just first responders, and we're looking to see what that's going to look like for our summer emergency childcare plan. In terms of our parks, we think that parks are such a critical aspect of people's lives, particularly for health and both physical and mental health, and particularly in this time where we're all sort of locked in. We think it's really important to provide access to those parks. So trying to find the right balance between ensuring that all of our neighborhood parks and all of our regional parks remain open and available to folks, but making sure that we're not creating situations in which there's overcrowding in these parks, because then we end up having, creating the problem that we're all trying to solve. So one of the changes that we've made this week, starting this weekend, given that the weather is going to be really warm, given that Mother's Day and Mother's Day weekend typically is one of our busiest weekends in terms of people visiting parks, particularly our big regional parks, the parks that folks think about like Green Lake and Seward Park and Lincoln, etc. So we've made a change that till the end of the current stay-at-home order, which extends to May 31st, those big regional parks will be closed as of 8 p.m. each night. Normally parks are open till 11:30. And part of that is also because the shift we're taking on our operations for parks is we encourage people to get outdoors, to exercise, to walk, to run, to bike. But then we would need folks to go back home. And so the activities that happen after hours, picnicking, bonfires, things like that are still prohibited. Our campaign with parks currently is keep it moving, get outdoors, take your walk, and then go back home. And so, for example, for this Mother's Day weekend, go out, take a walk, do your exercise, and then go home and cook your mom or your mother figure a dinner at home. So as of 8 p.m., those big parks are going to be closed.
That's great advice from Mother's Day, and thank you so much, Jesús. As we're talking about summer and it's going to get warmer and hotter, I wanted to bring in Debra Smith, who is the General Manager and CEO of Seattle City Light, to talk to us about some of the discount programs that might be available to help you and your family. Debra?
Thank you so much, Angela. Hi, I'm Debra Smith with Seattle City Light, and yeah, it's going to get hot out there, and that can mean increased energy bills. We also know that folks have been home more, working from home, schooling from home. That can result in increased bills. So both Seattle City Light and Seattle Public Utilities, we've partnered, and we have a number of programs that are available all the time. But what we've tried to do during this time is to increase the access to those programs, make it easier for folks to get the help they need. So we do offer the utility discount program, and that's for folks who are income qualified. Details about that at seattle.gov. And what that provides is a 60% discount on your electric bill and a 50% discount on your water and other utility bills. What we've done right now, and again, that's a program that is administered through Jason Johnson's group, the Human Services Department, and it's been a very, very successful program. And we know that we are the number of folks who are enrolled has always lagged significantly behind the number of folks that are eligible for the program. So what we've done right now is we've expanded an existing pilot, and right now you can go online and you can fill out a one-page form online, very easy, and basically it's a self-certification program. So we just ask folks to certify that they meet the income requirements, and it's as easy as that. So that's the program that we really encourage folks who believe that they would be income qualified to access. We also know that the federal government is making additional low-income energy assistance program funds available. That's called LIHEAP, and many of our customers access those. And we both Seattle Public Utilities and Seattle City Light also have emergency access funds. We're also working really proactively with customers to create payment arrangements that work for you. So we are flexible. What we want is we want to help you set up a plan, particularly if you've gone into this time with a previously past due bill, or as we know, those past due amounts for folks, because we are not disconnecting people for non-payment, they can accrue very quickly. So all we ask is that you give us a call and we'll work with you to develop a payment plan that works within your budget.
Thank you, Debra. And I'm assuming this also applies to, in some ways, as a COVID-19 relief.
Yes, so a lot of the programs that we've put together, the no disconnects, the very flexible payment arrangements, the self-certification of the utility discount program. We are currently waiving interest charges and late fees. Those were actions that our council and mayor's office took very early on. So that is all part of what we would call a COVID response package. And, you know, I can tell you that I spend time every week on the phone with trade associations, folks across this country who are engaged in the provision of essential services, and that's electric and water services. And I know that the federal government, the state, they are constantly looking at ways that we can provide more assistance to customers now and in the coming months as we work towards economic recovery and reopening. Also, just know that because we know you are using more services, check out our energy efficiency programs. We're able to help people even remotely. So if you feel like, gee, my bill or my home isn't as well weatherized as it could be, now might be the time to get some help. And we do have some great programs, particularly for income qualified individuals.
Debra, thank you so much. I'm going to now ask your counterpart, General Manager and CEO of Seattle Public Utility, Mami Hara. Mami, can you talk to us about some of the discount programs available?
Yes, of course. I think that Debra did a fantastic job talking about our shared programs in terms of the utility discount program, as well as the very flexible payment plans and self-certification into the UDP program. The one thing that I do want to add is that neither utility is turning off anyone's service during this time. During the COVID-19 state of emergency, which has been in effect since early March, and that we have discontinued shutting off anyone's service, and this will be in effect until the mayor proclaims the state of emergency to be over. We are also, if you know of anyone who has service that has been previously disconnected, you know, please tell them that we are eager to turn back their service on. We've contacted every customer, the few customers that had service turned off, and proactively and offered to return their services. But we just want to make sure that everybody has water and electricity during this time. Thank you, Angela.
Mami, thank you so much. I wanted to go to Emily Alvarado. You know, Emily, I'm a former television news anchor and I worked in Miami, and we have a 6-month hurricane season. And during times like that, when a community is vulnerable, people try to slip in with their predatory behavior. And I saw it happen so often. And I want to talk about potential predatory behavior that you might be hearing about, or that you know how to tell us how to nip it in the bud in case people are trying to contact African Americans in the Central District to take their property, let's say.
Thank you, Angela, and good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here today with all of you. First of all, I just want to say that in this moment, we all realize that your home is more important than ever, because our home is our health care. It's our way to be safe, It's our way to be grounded. And so the city is really interested in making sure that nobody loses their home at this time. But that is particularly true in the Central District, where a legacy of government actions and displacement has really left households even more vulnerable. And when you see the actions we have heard reported by Africatown News and by the Seattle Times and by residents themselves who have called us and reached out and said that people are coming unsolicited to your homes to tell you that they will buy it without ever having seen it. And at a time when people are feeling financially like they're struggling and uncertain, that can be a really aggressive tactic. And so we want to make sure that homeowners know their rights and that people don't feel like they have to give up their home. But even more than that, we want to give you support and tools. And so I can tell you some of the things that we're thinking about in response to the community pressures that have been felt. But I really, and I know maybe this isn't the best format to do it, I want to hear from you on what your ideas are, because you know your experience and we want to be responsive. So first of all, just to say that we don't want anyone to lose their home, and we have some things in place that we can do to support you. First of all, if you see those behaviors and they feel predatory to you, we recommend that you call the Washington State Attorney General's office and flag the kind of behaviors that are taking place. Second of all, if you feel that you can't keep your home because you're getting underwater, you should call the person who holds your mortgage servicer, and talk to them about what they can offer. Right now, the federal government has made it so that the people who hold your mortgage may have to allow you to not pay for a time, or they are required to work with you to figure out a situation. The Washington Homeownership Resource Center, which we can follow up from this presentation with a phone number, is a great place to call if you're feeling like you can't make payments. And the city has a foreclosure prevention program that you can access through that hotline, and we'll make sure again to get that to you so that you can call and get help. But for me, that's not enough. We also have existing programs that homeowners can get access to home repair grants if you're a low-income homeowner, because we don't feel that a person should lose their home because of an expensive side sewer repair that you have to make. So absolutely reach out to our office if you feel that you need home repair grants or some resources to be stable in your home. But still, I don't think that having people be able to hold on to their homes, especially in the Central District, is enough, right? The legacy of displacement and the ties and fabric that has been broken by real estate actions means that we need to do more. So one thing that we could do, and we are exploring, and I'd love all your feedback on, is how do we provide folks who have been displaced the access to down payment assistance so you can buy a home and have that home be permanently available only to community members so that we can rebuild the Central District. I know that the homes are so expensive in the Central District that our typical resource isn't enough. So maybe now is the time that we say, let's make a bigger resource for people to return to the Central District than we have in other places. Those are the kinds of strategies we're thinking through. And again, would love your input. You know how to reach me at emily.alvarado@seattle.gov anytime if you have an idea on how we really take some of our housing resources that we have, and we have a response both to COVID, but also to long-standing institutionalized racism and market practices that have impacted the Central District. Why don't we use this as a time to help people stay in their homes and buy new homes? So we're looking into that and want to be a partner with all of you, because I know that we have heard from you that the displacement has got to stop, and want to be a partner in providing some real resources to do that.
Emily, awesome. Thank you so much. And Sam, Assefa, I wanted to bring you in as we're talking about gentrification and the community. Just talk to us a little bit about, Sam, Assefa, talk to us a little bit about what we can expect.
So thanks, Angela, and thank you for having me here. This is a very important conversation at this time. As you know, Office of Planning does a lot of the long-term planning in terms of how the city should address equity and mitigation around this gentrification, displacement. So we're already focusing on primarily in the immediate sense to look at the data around geographic information systems as well as demographics. And that data, which initially started through our comprehensive plan, is what is helping inform a lot of the responses in the short term as well as in the long term that the city is focused on. So gentrification, changes in population, especially now, is going to be one of the most critical elements as we move into what recovery looks like and what we need to put in place from a regulatory perspective, from an economic development perspective, as well as from some of our focus in the high displacement and low access opportunity areas throughout the city. And this applies in multiple areas. Obviously, the most important piece is housing and community wealth building. So what do we need to do to double up with very significant challenging times to double up in some of the programs that are already working and bearing some fruits? And with our work with Office of Housing, combining our resources to address a lot of community wealth and community ownership of ground floor spaces. Those address issues of not only gentrification, but displacement. If neighborhoods in the central district cannot, or individuals cannot own property, gentrification will happen. And ownership and community wealth are the central elements of mitigating gentrification and displacement. So as we start thinking about what recovery looks like, one of the most important components will be how data and information about demographics, what we expect in terms of especially people of color in different neighborhoods, and the Central District is the poster child of gentrification and change in good times. And in worse times now, it becomes even more important that we elevate that as one of the most important lenses through which all city departments look into how we respond around recovery and what it means to help community wealth building on very specific projects and sites. So while it's going to be a very challenging time moving forward, one of the most exciting part of really thinking about how we change or how we double up in some of the good work that the city has been doing to address the same issues from previous policies. Now we have to start looking at it with even more intensity and more urgency. So that's what I'm looking forward to in terms of understanding the data and how that helps inform mitigating gentrification, mitigating displacement, and supporting communities of color, especially to increase community wealth building and ownership in their neighborhoods.
Sam, Assefa, thank you so much. And moving from gentrification of homeowners, let's move into displacement of businesses. I want to bring in Bobby Lee, the Director of the Office of Economic Development. Bobby, good to have you with us. Certainly been a lot of displacement of businesses here in the Central District, and I know that your office is working really hard on this issue.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, I woke up with a little bit of allergies this morning, so I'm a little congested. Yes, that's right. Especially in Seattle, if you think about how the pandemic got played out, the very first day we got exposed to the pandemic was January 21st, 2020. And so Seattle was the very first city to face the pandemic, as you may all recall. By the time the Congress passed the CARES Act on March 27th, consumer spending here in Seattle actually dropped by 30%. And when the consumer behavior changes, it means that the economy is changing. And as a result, many small businesses had to lay off their employees, and unemployment insurance claims then shot up 3,500% in the month of March. And as you may have heard on the news, the unemployment rate as of yesterday is now almost 15% at the national level. So we are dealing with a crisis, an economic crisis for sure. But what's even more disturbing is that this pandemic is having disproportionate impact to small businesses owned by people of color, and immigrant and refugees and women. And many are still on their own, and this is what keeps us up at night, is knowing that many of the small business owners, particularly from underserved communities, are still on their own. And while the coronavirus does not discriminate based on race, without immediate bold action, its economic fallout will disproportionately affect underserved communities. And as a result, the city right out of the gate, when the federal government was still trying to set up their SBA loan and grant products, and as well as the unemployment insurance program, in Seattle for 2 months, we were on our own. And so immediately, we put in place 6 different measures, and some has been talked about, so I won't get into details. But deferment in taxes and utility payments, Debra and Mami did amazing work to get that program up and running in a matter of a week or 2. And then, of course, we launched the small business grants. Certainly it's not enough, but we did launch that at the local level. And 3 is really navigating local small business owners to understand how to access the SBA loans and grants and other federal relief programs. And number 4 is stopping commercial evictions. This is something that the mayor and the council voted on, is still in place, and it will be, if not already, extended. And then promoting restaurant delivery has been one of our strategy as well. And lastly, we wanted to make sure it's easy for small business owners to access good information. So we have centralized on our website a resource guide, and we also have every Wednesday at 11 o'clock, we also have webinars for small business owners. And by the way, when we provide SBA technical assistance or help people navigate local, state, and federal programs, we also have 8 different languages among our team so that language access is an issue. It has been an issue, but now we have a team that are able to accommodate up to 8 different languages when you call in. In fact, I'd like to share is 206-684-8090. If you call that number, then our staff will navigate, help you navigate into the right team to help you with a variety of different questions that you might have. So I'll leave it at that level for now.
Bobby, thanks so much. Good to hear from you as always. I want to return to this issue in just a second, but I've got a question that I want us to discuss. Someone has written in, I am concerned about the push to close down neighborhood streets. My early education center, and the thing just went away, so let me read it from my phone. Let's see, technology, we love it, don't we? Okay. My early education center is on 22nd Avenue and has been since approximately 1973 at that location. Although the new well-meaning neighbors want it closed, it will impact how parents are able to drop off and pick up children. It simply makes sense for SDOT to speak with long-term residents and businesses prior to making street closure decisions. Sam Zimbabwe with the Seattle Department of Transportation, can you help us with this one?
Absolutely, and that's a great question, and one that we've gotten a fair amount of. So what we've done, as folks have seen some of the Stay Healthy Streets coming, and we've got about 20 miles of neighborhood streets now that have been closed through traffic. What we've done so far, and sort of where we think this is going, is we've taken existing designated neighborhood greenways. So those are generally lower traffic streets that we've made small scale investments in people walking and biking. They tend to be flatter streets and lower traffic and with fewer businesses on them. They already have some signs on them that say neighborhood greenways and sort of point people towards destinations. We've taken those and for 20 miles across the city, we've made those into local access only. So anybody who has a home or a business on that block can still access the block, but we've made it so people can't drive or are not supposed to drive through those streets, so that they remain low traffic. And doing that has enabled us to make them open for people walking and people biking to also use the street itself and not be confined to the sidewalk, because so many places across the city have 6-foot sidewalks, if that, but 6 foot sort of a standard sidewalk width, which makes it very hard to maintain social distance and be able to walk on the street. So we were seeing people already starting to walk in the street, and we wanted to make sure that was being done as safely as possible. So we've done the 20 miles. It's been a success so far, and we're seeking to make those permanent. One thing that's challenging for us at SDOT in this period of time, I think probably is true for agencies across the city, is figuring out how we engage with community on things that are new. So all of the Stay Healthy Streets that we have done so far in this pilot, this 20 miles, have been existing neighborhood greenways that have been part of some level of community engagement and planning to pick those routes and figure out how those would be connected. Right now, in the current climate, we don't think we can expand beyond neighborhood greenways with these types of programs, just because it's so hard to engage with community in a meaningful way, in meaningful dialogue right now, and figure out how to look at different routes and what the potential impacts are. So if a street's not a neighborhood greenway, we're not looking to make these types of changes. As we think about what it means to make these Stay Healthy Streets more permanent, we'll be thinking about how to tweak or how to make sure that we maintain that local access for all businesses and residences that are on those streets that might be closed for through traffic. So I hope that gets to some of the questions. We've also seen, and as we've talked about this morning, the need to connect people safely to things like parks and schools and recreation is going to outlast this COVID-19 crisis, and these are opportunities to make sure that all neighborhoods and all communities in Seattle have opportunities for safe access for those types of activities as well. And we look forward to, as we emerge from this public health crisis, making sure that we have meaningful engagement with community about how to build that into the lasting fabric of the community as well.
Sam, we've got a response, I believe, to what you have been talking about. Someone has replied, there is a disproportionate impact on residents of color. Most choose to drive rather than walk. The newer residents of privilege react negatively when residents of color who need to reach family members attempt to drive down the blocks in the central area. That's a comment from one of our viewers.
Yeah, I think those are we have to address those concerns, and I think we are. This is an area where we will seek to make investments that benefit all members of the community and make it possible for everybody in the community to be able to walk or bike or get around however they need to. As I said, those blocks that are closed for through traffic are still open for people who need to access them, and we can reinforce that. We put out signs very, very quickly, and can look to reinforce that as we look at making our making some of these changes more permanent and long lasting.
Sam, thank you so much. Bobby Lee, I've got one for you. The grants to businesses with less than 5 employees are not enough. The small business grants should go up to 20 employees. Without assistance for businesses that are growing will kill their trajectory.
No, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Great.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. The interesting thing about the state of Washington is that there's a provision in the state constitution that prevents cities from providing loans and grants to small businesses. It's called the Gift of Public Funds Law. And therefore, the small business grants that we did allocate out to 250 businesses were all federal dollars because we were prevented from using general fund, city money, from providing grants and loans to small businesses. Unfortunately, the federal dollars comes with its own rules and restrictions. And what it states is called CDBG dollars, Community Development Block Grants. And the federal law says that when you give these monies out to what they call micro businesses, it has to be 5 employees or less. So I agree with you that we should have a variety of grant and loan portfolio for different sized businesses. Unfortunately, the state constitution prevents us from doing that. Right now, we're also fundraising in partnership with my colleagues on this phone, private dollars to help allocate additional grants in the near future. And when we use private grants, our goal is to expand the size of the employees. And so you'll be hearing about that initiative in the near future.
Bobby, thank you so much. Randy Engstrom, can you talk about the philanthropy strategy? And then I want to get back to Mami and to Debra to talk about some things.
Yeah, for sure. So when this crisis really started to scale in early March, we recognized a lot of really amazing efforts that were happening, from the mutual aid work emerging in community to the philanthropic work happening at Seattle Foundation and elsewhere. And it got to a place where we were tracking 8 different COVID relief funds and dozens of crowdfunding efforts, all well-intentioned and all disaggregated. So I was asked to help coordinate and sort of map out where all the resources were going so that we could ensure that where possible we were identifying and meeting the needs of community. We focused early and primarily on food security. We launched a $5 million food voucher program that leveraged city dollars. That was sweet and beverage tax dollars. We launched the program in OED that was around small business stabilization, and point taken around. We had 9,000 applications and we're able to do 250 awards. We are all painfully aware of the scale of the crisis and no more needs to be done. We were able to offer some cultural relief to our nonprofit partners and our cultural partners throughout the city through the Office of Arts and Culture, and through the Office of Housing, we were able to support rent relief programs, food, shelter, economic support where possible, but we know we need to do more. And so in the short term, we were really focused on basic needs, and now we have to think about both continuing that support while also engaging in some early reopening and recovery conversations, because it's going to take a pretty substantial effort across private, public, and philanthropic communities in order to meet the urgency and the scale of the needs that are going to be on the other side of this crisis. And I think it's important to note, and I think I speak for all of my cabinet colleagues, that we have no intention to build back the city as it was in January of 2020, but we have an opportunity to reimagine the city through a lens of our racial equity values, through a lens of our commitment to creativity and resilience, and that's the community we want to build back to. And so I think our philanthropy strategy is trying to co-create a world that is more just and more inclusive and more equitable on the other side of the crisis.
Randy, thank you so much. Sam, I've got someone asking a question. They want to make sure that they understand. They said, what type of outreach is planned to mitigate this type of, we're looking for Sam Zimbabwe, this type of vigilante response? And I want to make sure that people understood that even though these streets are closed down, if you live in the area, you are still or work, you are still able to move about. Is that correct, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate the questions that are coming in from folks about how we think about making investments like the Stay Healthy Streets permanent and doing that with community. So I just responded in the chat as well that this idea about how to communicate people who need to access those blocks that are closed can still do that. There might be an opportunity to work with neighborhood artists or community on what those signs look like and how to tailor these things to the various communities that where we're doing this, because we're doing it all over the city. And then how to also communicate to people that if there's a car on the street, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's work, that everybody's welcome on these streets. That means that people who are walking in the street are welcome, people riding bikes in the street are welcome, and also people who are in a car that needs to access that block that's closed are also welcome. So I think this is exactly what this dialogue through Impact 2020 is really about, and I appreciate everybody's feedback.
Sam, thank you so much. We are getting some questions from our viewers, so let me just go ahead and ask the first question here. Is the city planning to work with King County to further delay the collection of property taxes? Andres, can you help me route this one?
Sure. Maybe we can go to Emily, who might have some perspective on this. Obviously, the property taxes are collected through the county, but Emily, do you want to weigh in on this one?
Sure. So I don't, I'm going to be real upfront. I don't have an exact answer to that question, but what I can say is that, property taxes are part of the bundle of funds, including a mortgage that folks need to pay, that I know when you're economically impacted and don't have the resources is really challenging. And all of those funds can be paid for by foreclosure prevention resources. And right now, I will be honest, the federal government has not provided any additional direct resource for people to pay their mortgage and property taxes. However, the housing levy resource that I mentioned can be used to do that. So if you're needing something to get through and help with your housing costs, you can contact the Washington Homeownership Resource Center to do that. Also, there are some property tax deferral programs if you are a senior and low income. So we'll make sure, Angela, to follow up with this call with the information for folks on how they can find out about the existing property tax deferral programs that are operating.
Emily, thank you so much. And Sam, I just want to kind of round things out. Sam, Zimbabwe, we just heard back from the gentleman or the person, I apologize, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but this is a chronic problem that I hear people just saying in the Central District, African Americans. And what the person said is yes to what you said, but if the folk walking on the Stay Healthy Street are giving the middle finger or refusing to move out of the way, that makes it difficult to reach the destination on these closed blocks. So, it's neighbors needing to be good to neighbors, but it is also the history of the Central District that we are living now, where wealthier people are moving in and they don't have a sense of culture of the Central District, and that there do seem to be some sort of pinch points between African Americans in the Central District and others who are moving in who have far higher incomes.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said and the comments that are coming in. The idea here is to make possible for everybody in the community to be able to access the street and be able to share that street. I know that there, in this period of time when people are very stressed out about all the things we've been talking about this morning in terms of economic impacts, health impacts, community impacts, that it's often hard for people to be good to each other too. So the idea here is to create a shared environment where people can stay safe walking around their neighborhood getting recreation. That's why these are limited numbers of streets, trying to connect people to and from recreation or shopping or other things that they might need to do in getting through the neighborhood, but also maintaining access for anybody who needs to use those blocks. And I hear and very much appreciate people raising concerns about inappropriate responses or people giving each other the middle finger, and I think that then puts it on me and my department to figure out how we communicate and make those Stay Healthy Streets the type of welcoming environment where people can access those for no matter what they need to do on those blocks, and no matter how they're getting back and forth. So I hear and appreciate that feedback.
There was a thank you to Emily and Samuel. I'm assuming that's Assefa. Got a couple. Let me read this one question. Let's see. Also, will we be talking about COVID-19 in prisons and how prisons are a barrier to health care for Black people because we are disproportionately imprisoned and health care is the worst in prisons? Can this be connected to talking about access to testing and health care that is Black affirming and addresses structural racism in medicine and persons? Mariko Lockhart, Director of Seattle Office of Civil Rights, thank you for taking this one.
Thank you, Angela, and really appreciate that question from the person who submitted it. This is this is a really critical concern, and it has been for a long time. And I think it's one of those concerns that has been raised and on the minds of community, and that government was on a lag to respond, and it was easily predictable. That prisons are spaces where social distancing, all of the measures that we were recommending were going to be much more difficult and even impossible. Prisoners who don't have access to running water, soap, hand sanitizer was considered a contraband. So all of the things we were, pressing for everyone to undertake as public health safety measures were unavailable to our prison population. It is something that my office has been in conversation and working with the mayor's office on. As a reminder, our role here is largely advisory and an advocacy role. We don't operate jails or prisons ourselves. That is a King County role and a state role. So in our conversations with, at the level at which we have influence, so, who's prosecuting and arresting for misdemeanors, those are folks that would be within city purview, and folks who would be potentially crowding courtrooms and entering the King County Jail. Those numbers have been regularly decreasing. Originally, when we started these conversations, folks were double bunked and didn't have access to, the things that I mentioned. It is our understanding from data coming out of King County Jail that they've released, I think it's a couple hundred of the folks in there, that enough so that people are no longer double bunked, that they are in single bunks. There's lots of issues that we're very concerned about, and it certainly is an issue of structural racism. We know that the folks who are incarcerated at every step of the process have been impacted by structural racism, from who's reporting crimes to who's arrested for crimes to who's prosecuted, and then what the sentencing is. So I really appreciate the question. It's something that we are certainly advocating around, and remain deeply concerned and continue to advocate at the particularly at the levels where the jurisdiction lies, King County and the state. So thank you for that question.
Mariko, thank you so much for your answer and for the work that you do. I want to bring in Matias Valenzuela again to give us a public health perspective on the same question. Matias?
Yes, hi, thanks, Angela, and thanks, Mariko, for your what you just said. Because yeah, from a public health perspective too, it's not only just a racial equity issue and those things. It's actually, as you were referencing, it is a public health concern. These are tight congregate settings and all of that. So really, the best practices from a public health perspective is to reduce the numbers of incarcerated. So in King County, in our Department of Adult and Juvenile Detention, we have reduced by hundreds the number of inmates in our King County jails. And I think this is also, I think, what Randy was talking about earlier in terms of taking some of the opportunities that we are seeing right now to actually transform our systems. I think King County, and also there's some real interest in saying these are just not changes that we should be doing now because of COVID-19. It's how can we use some of these opportunities to keep the numbers low, because also from a public health perspective, high rates of incarceration and those things and the impacts of that is of a concern, with or without COVID-19. So thanks, Angela.
Thank you so much, Matias. I want to move into speaking with City Light as well as Seattle Public Utilities about whether or not your utilities or anything will be shut off. Mami, Hara, with Seattle Public Utilities, will people's utilities be cut off?
No, people's utilities will not be cut off, at least until the mayor deems the state of COVID emergency to be over, potentially much longer than that. So we don't know the exact date that will end, but for now, people should rest assured that the water will keep flowing out of their taps and their lights will stay on. And also, they are always encouraged to contact us to set up any kind of payment arrangement that is workable for them in terms of time frame and initial deposit amount. We're providing very flexible terms at this time, so that we can help people to stay on top of their bills as much as possible while not creating any kind of burden for them. One thing that Debra and I wanted to highlight, though, is that there are folks who are scamming residents in the city, contacting to say that we are turning off their utilities unless they pay via some kind of a cash equivalent to them. And please know that if someone contacts you, that is not someone from the utilities and it is a scam.
Mami, thank you so much for addressing that. Debra, I was going to have you address that also, but yeah, the scams are real and we need to be extremely cautious. What should people look for and what should they not look for?
So utility scams happen, there's a wave of them, it seems like at least every year. And unfortunately, as Emily discussed, the predatory behavior right now is worse. I think the thing to know is just what Mami said. The city will never call you and demand payment in order to maintain service. So we will call you. We are doing some proactive outreach to talk with folks and say, hey, how can we help? That's particularly true for small businesses where we want to work with folks to come up with a plan that supports them, but we will never call and demand payment. So if you receive a call like that, we've even heard of folks showing up pre-COVID, showing up at people's doors making similar demands. That's not how we roll. That will never happen. So if you have any question, call us, but never feel you'll never get a demand of that sort from your community-owned utilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Debra, because that is not the way we roll. Let's go back to Bobby Lee. Bobby, I know there's been some scams with small business loans also and grants.
No, that is right. I mean, thank you for pulling me into this discussion. It's been reported by many small businesses that the scammers are disguising themselves as SBA, that's Small Business Administration, that's a federal agency, disguising themselves as SBA officers and asking for personal information and a small fee. And if you are getting those calls, then do not share your personal information. It is a scam. The government will not be asking for a fee in order to process your grants and loans. Now, having said that, many of our departments, Debra and Mami and myself and DON, other departments within the city, we are currently reaching out to small businesses in order to provide technical assistance. So it creates this confusion in the community, especially among our underserved community. On one hand, we're saying don't share your personal information and don't get scammed, but at the same time, people like Angela is out there, going door to door. And so we do want to make sure that you understand that it is confusing times. But when my staff or our city employees go out, we're not going to be asking for any fees or personal information. And so just keep that in mind.
Bobby, excellent. Thank you so much. I want to go back to, Sam, Zimbabwe, the issue that we were talking about with the street closures. Somebody, Sharon, she said, there needs to be an understanding that in the Black culture, riding down the street and waving to people that look like us is a culture thing. It's not just about riding down the street. It's a way that we see and communicate with each other. So I just wanted to go ahead and point out that's a really great point, because it gets into culture and some of the issues that I know Black people have had, African Americans here in the Central District, is the disrespect of the culture and what the Central District has meant and what it still means.
Yeah, I think so. I really appreciate this conversation. And I think this is a great place for us to maybe go in future Impact 2020 conversations. Maybe we can, when we're all able to be together again in person. I want to be able to have these conversations about how we can make these types of opportunities to make our streets safe and healthy for everybody, and have everybody feel welcomed in our streets. So I appreciate and I'm taking very much value the feedback that we're getting here on this, and I think it's a rich area for future conversation. So I don't know if I have more answers at this point. I really appreciate the conversation.
Sam, Zimbabwe, thank you so much. Mami, you got a thank you from someone. Ms. Hara, thank you for sharing that information. I had someone call me several times a few months ago. So thank you. That's for Mami. We've got a couple of questions. Okay. How do you address how Blacks who still live in the Central District are being treated and questioned? Why are they there? Redlining and the inability to secure home loans have decimated the Black community. COVID-19 has unveiled the injustices to a degree that is frightening. What are the leaders truly going to do? Andres, I'm going to toss this to you to route it.
Yeah, well, let's get something clear. We all know that redlining is something that happened in Seattle, happened specifically into the African American Black community, and is still happening implicitly, as if not not explicitly anymore through bank loans, et cetera, but implicitly a lot through the different institutions and structures. I think there's two ways of answering this question. One is some of the historical data and things that Sam Assefa is dealing with in his shop, and also from the home loans perspective and some of the building up of property, et cetera. I'd like to throw it to Emily Alvarado to answer. So why don't we start with Sam Assefa, talk about it, and then thirdly, I think Randy Engstrom has an interesting perspective here in terms of some of the ways that his office has partnered with African American organizations, cultural organizations in the Central District to kind of amplify cultural presence or restore some cultural presence in the area. So why don't we go with those three?
So that's absolutely right. Redlining is one of the central long-term impacts that is affecting especially the Central District. As you know, that was the fundamental reason in the last comprehensive plan we started really focusing on what data tells us about areas that are impacted by displacement and lack of access to opportunity. And those maps match exactly the 1920s and 30s redlining that took place. Since 2016, most of our focus, especially the birth of the Equitable Development Initiative, was really born out of not only the recognition that redlining has had significant impact in the past, but it continues to reverberate in land use planning policies, wealth building, and everything else around people's quality of life and affordability. So that analysis and that data that I was talking about is central to our policy decisions, and it has been in the last few years. The question is, as Randy mentioned, the future, we're not going to go back to where we were before and how we were doing things. The question we want to raise in working with communities is, how do we address with those data points, what are the critical elements in the next 3 years, 4 years in the immediate sense, but then what are sort of the long-term transformation that has to take place to mitigate those redlining issues. Obviously, the immediate response is the most important because people are losing their homes and their businesses and their cultures. We need to address that. But I think the fundamental shift that has to take place is, how do we use that information and data through different programs that we have, even around public spaces? So we have documented a similar disparity around access to public spaces. And its health impact on communities of color because of lack of green spaces. When Sam Zimbabwe talks about creating more public spaces, what we have documented is there's significant amount of public spaces throughout the city, but they're not evenly distributed or accessed. How do we create more of those based on those race and social justice lens and mapping and data that would inform our decision?
Sam, thank you so much. I know Andres had also wanted to bring a couple of other people into the conversation. We've got about 20 minutes left, and we've got some community conversations we want to get to, but I really need to bring in my colleague Elsa Batras-Boni to talk about Census 2020 and how important it is for this community to make sure we're filling that out. Elsa, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me, Angela?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for having me and for incorporating census in this very rich conversation. One thing I have noticed in this whole conversation is how much we talk about data, how much we talk about numbers, how much we talk about where we all come from. And the truth of the matter is that we have been waiting for 10 years to refresh and count our population in our communities, and this happened in the middle of a pandemic to count how many people we have in our communities. And so what we are experiencing right now is that no matter what, the census is still happening, and as you know, the census, people don't really associate it with our day-to-day lives. And the census is basically a count of how many people live, where do they live, and the results of this count come back as the resources, representation, and truth. The government uses this information and data to make plans, and more than ever, knowing how many people live and where do we live, it's going to be crucial for the next 10 years. And so I'm just here to invite folks. The thing that people can do is to self-response and participate and say, I count, I live here, I am in the city, and I will be here for the next 10 years. So it's an easy thing to do. You go to mycensus2020.gov. You enter your address if you don't have a code that you should have received in the mail, and you just answer 10 questions. And those questions have to do with who lives in the household and you answer ages, names, and race. And this is how you share and participate. I have a great news to say that Seattle and King County and Washington has a great level of participation, which is great news under the current situation. Seattle, and in general, the state is the 6th in responding to the census. The city of Seattle is close to responding. 68% of our folks who are at home are answering and going online and participating in the census. I believe this is for all the work that a lot of organizations have done, understanding why is this so important. This is not about numbers. This is not about data. This is about showing that we are here and that we will be here, and our kids, our folks count for the next 10 years. So this is what I have for you, Angela.
Elsa, thank you so much for joining Impact 2020 to talk to us about census, and thank you for all of the hard work that I see you doing every day we're in the office. Thank you for what you're doing, and congratulations, because we are doing so well here in Washington State. That's awesome. Let me get back to a community question, and I'm going to have to go to my phone. Things are moving quickly. Sam, Zimbabwe. Someone is writing that they are an ADA Black American essential worker, and he says that I have been denied ADA access on the bus, so he's requesting help. Additionally, he has a question or a comment. The issue I'm finding is that non-people of color are biased to the historical culture of the CD or POV who have been ready living in the neighborhood. I don't see that the city is addressing behavioral biases and their conduct towards POV. So the first part of the question, Sam, is of course for you, and that is with respect to his inability to get access as an ADA essential employee.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I'm very happy to bring it to our partners at King County Metro and understand it a little bit more. The King County Metro has gone to, they've eliminated fares for the last few months and have moved towards rear door boarding only, except for folks that need access from the front of the bus for the ramps to get ADA access. I do know, and this is an area where I think we've had to work with King County Metro and we'll continue to partner with them on solutions, is that as they've sought to maintain social distancing on buses, they've authorized drivers to pass by people if the bus reaches a certain capacity. And I think that's hard, I think, for riders to understand exactly what's going on, if that is what's happening. And I know that they've been working to make sure that bus drivers are also safe, to limit contact as much as possible. That's why they went to rear door boarding. As we've seen where ridership in the King County Metro system has remained strong, it's remained strong in parts of Seattle in particular, even when the regional bus ridership has gone way down, parts of the city have remained strong. And that has been a challenge in balancing the need for social distancing for the health and safety of everybody riding the bus, and making sure that there's enough bus capacity in the city to serve everybody's needs. So I will take that question and make sure we bring it back to King County Metro. I know they're trying to work with riders and drivers and making sure that everybody who's using the bus system is safe.
Sam, Zimbabwe, thank you so much for that answer. I'm going to bring back Randy Engstrom in to deal with the second part of the question, which had to deal with bias and historical culture of the Central District, and just the inability of people who are not Black to understand the cultural significance of the area.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think a lot of what folks are describing in the questions and what Sam is hearing is really a lack of understanding of that historical cultural context. The Central area because of redlining, but also because of the strength of community, has been the heart of the Black community in Seattle for decades. And as that painful displacement and gentrification process happens, some of that history is not being acknowledged by the new folks coming in. I do, I also think that's true of cultural institutions, and we've seen a lot of cultural institutions in the central area that serve Black community be pushed out as well. I do want to lift up, obviously the incredible work of Africatown, not just in the cultural side, but in the community development side, and my colleague Emily can speak to that better than I can. But just want to really, we are privileged to have the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Institute as part of our office. It has been an anchor of Black culture in the central area for decades, and will continue to be an anchor for that community. That is why we work together to help develop Langston, which is the nonprofit that was established between community and the city to carry forward the historic mission of cultivating Black brilliance in the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Institute. That also allows that organization to have more self-determination than just being a city program. Also, the Central District Forum for Arts and Ideas, the Northwest African American Museum are both doing really incredible work in this time. Sharon Williams, the head of CD Forum, is really one of the pillars of the cultural community in our city, and also leads the historic Central Area Arts and Cultural District, which is also centered on the Black and African American experience in the neighborhood. So while the change has been hard and continues to be painful, I do think that it's important to invest in these cultural institutions that do carry and hold much of that history. I think making sure we as the city do a better job of articulating that history and context to folks coming into these neighborhoods is part of our responsibility. And it's something that I think that we can partner on going forward.
Randy, thank you so much. We've got 10 more minutes, and I've got to get to this question. Elsa, if I can get you back on board. Someone wants to know, how is the city helping folk complete their census if they don't have access to a computer? It used to be via libraries and other public spaces. What is the contingency outreach plan during this public health emergency? Thank you, Elsa.
Thank you, Angela, for that question. That's a great question. So people can do it on their phone. I just want to remember that. I remind people that people can call a number, and I'm going to put it on right here on the side to get the somebody to call them back, because the Census Bureau has a huge line, and the response. We also getting ready to help people by having a line in the Seattle Public Libraries. And so that program is going to start probably in the next 2 weeks, where community members will be able to call a local line in partnership with the Seattle Public Libraries and other nonprofits who got some outreach funding. So we will be able to have folks help them by phone. So stay tuned for that information that we're putting together. And just to remind folks that people are not too late. They can do it. We want to do a big push for folks to go and fill out their census over the summer. The deadlines got pushed back, but we want to make sure that by the end of the summer we have everybody.
Thank you, Elsa. And someone has included in the published comments, they say, for more info on the census, the Medium published a fabulous guide. You can see it here, and there is a link. So thank you for that. One last question. What is the city doing to ensure community development organizations have a diverse staff? When Community Capital Development was founded years ago by Jim Thomas, the staff was very diverse. Now with Business Impact Northwest, it is now predominantly white staff. That doesn't feel right for supporting businesses run by people of color. Bobby Lee?
No, absolutely right. We should have diversity represented not only in the community development world, but throughout the city in various aspects of our ecosystem that supports our community. One of the difficulty that we have witnessed when the federal government allocated the SBA loan products and grant products called PPP and other products, it predominantly went to big business. And the big banks were actually the beneficiary of these federal aid that was supposed to go to many of our small businesses. And so even more now with CDFI partners that we work with, we need to make sure that piece of that pie is flowing into our neighborhood small businesses owned by people of color and immigrant and refugee and women population. One of the things that we're doing now is that my team is actually working directly with neighborhood partners to get applications from small businesses predominantly owned by people of color and helping them with the loan products. And then we're creating a pipeline to our CDFI partners so that they will get on the front of the line so that their applications are processed. So we have specific teams using 8 different languages right now, going out to the neighborhoods and creating these pipeline of applications so that our diverse communities have access to capital. And so this is the kind of things that we got to do more. And many of our staff, including Angela, who has been great at helping our team, many of our staff are from the community. We have hired staff from the neighborhoods that we're trying to serve. And so these folks I'm super proud of them, and Angela works with them all the time so she can testify that these folks are putting their heart on the line and they are working with the community directly and making sure that they get a piece of that pie that they deserve.
Bobby, thank you so much, and sincerely thank you and your department for what you do. It's a pleasure to be helping you all, and you have such a great team. I want to get to we've got 5 minutes left, but I want to get to this question because it's so important. I serve on the committee for special events, and COVID-19 has just created such an upheaval for special events in a city that has so many. So let's get to this question. Randy, one of the things I look forward to is the summer musical program. Is it canceled this year, or is there a chance it may happen with less children and social distancing in place? Maybe a Zoom concert?
That's a good question, but it's actually a question for my colleague Jesús Aguirre, because the summer musical remains a parks program, though it's a partnership that still has a lot of legacy with Langston Hughes.
Pardon me, you are correct. Mr. Aguirre.
Yes, thank you for that question. And this is sort of part of the discussion we're having every single day with our teams is sort of how do we begin to try to ramp back up some of these activities, and particularly some like these for our young people that are so important. The short answer for this is we have not figured this one out yet, but it's given where we are now with the stay-at-home order, given where sort of the various phases that the governor has sort of laid out, and certainly the mayor's ongoing commitment to making sure that we continue to keep people safe. Right now we cannot envision a situation in which that summer musical could happen in the same format, obviously. So we'll continue to understand and try to figure out other ways to meet some of the goals of that program, particularly around supporting our youth over the summer, because these things are so important in terms of keeping them engaged and safe and all that. So the short answer is the summer musical at this point, we are not planning on having it in the same format. I don't really have an answer yet as to what it could look like, whether it's some online way or other situations. But I guess I'll say there's more to come on that. But it's a pretty tough thing to figure out how to do right now.
Thank you, Jesús, and you're right. We just have to take it day by day and just remain safe. Thank you very much. We are almost out of time. Andres, I wanted to toss it to you for a second before I say goodbye to everyone.
Thank you, Angela. I'll just say that I'm so filled with gratitude to be able to do this event again. Thank you to my colleagues from across the different departments that have joined us today and answered these questions. Thank you to the Department of Neighborhood staff, Angela, you in particular, and Laura, Nate as well. We're in a space right now, we've heard the word unprecedented used time and time again, But from an outreach and engagement perspective, I truly believe that we're at a space where this is going to lead to a fundamental shift in how we center community concerns. Impact 2020 to me is about continuing the building of relationships and then tying those relationships directly to better outcomes for the community, particularly for the Black community, particularly in the Central District. So as we continue our engagement and as we continue these types of conversations, it's really important as we transition into recovery and reopening that we're centering community, that we're centering community experiences, and that experience turns into better outcomes for the community. So thank you so much, and I'll turn it over to Angela.
Andres, thank you so much. And I want to make sure if we can get the camera on me now. If any of you would like to get in touch with me, you can do so. I believe we have a slide, do we, with my my information on it. You can get in touch with me at angela.ray. There it is right there. And Ray is spelled R-A-E at seattle.gov. Or you can call me at 206-681-7284. Call me or email me for anything. I am happy to just chit chat or happy to handle any issue that you might be having. You have access, and that's what this has been about today, is the access that you truly do have. Don't feel like you don't know where to go, you don't know what to do. You've got my name and number right there, so call me for anything. I'd like to say thank you to all of the department directors for spending part of their beautiful sunny Saturday with us on Impact 2020, and we will be back because, as Andre said, this is not just a one-time thing. This is our second time, so we're going to do it again, and we're going to figure this technology out, and we'll have it down pat. But we'll see you all very soon, and thank you so much. And again, happy Mother's Day. Blessings to all of you. Goodbye.